Right, firefighters are still attending the hotspots on the 4th floor of the National Assembly in Cape Town. At the same time, the Hawks are continuing their probe into the fire. A 49-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the blaze. And President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was at the scene, called it a devastating and terrible setback. Let's get the latest now from our reporter, Monique Mortlock, who is in Parliament for us. Monique, what's the situation there today? I can see firefighters still working on the building.
Yes, Maseko, I'm going to ask my colleague Asanda Javu to show you what's happening right now. We've been seeing emergency vehicles like your City of Cape Town Fire and Rescue Service vehicles entering the premises, entering Parliament. We've been asked just to keep this driveway open for those emergency vehicles to make their way in and out. We also saw various MPs like Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Ms. Patricia de Lille, making her way in. Here we have a member of the parliamentary staff also coming out just to speak to the media. We've had MPs like Natasha Mazzoni also speaking to us, saying that talks of moving Parliament and some Parliament officials basically celebrating the fact that Parliament has burnt down, that should not be entertained right now. Right now we should be looking at assessing damages and trying to rebuild wherever we can. And a little earlier, the ANC's chief whip was saying that there will be a meeting of all the other chief whips a bit later on today, and then we as media will be getting a briefing and an update by the presiding officers, who will be doing a walkabout of the precinct only when it is safe to do so. We know that because firefighters are still on the scene, still just monitoring where there may be potential hotspots, as you mentioned, on the 4th floor. It's not yet 100% clear for anyone to be on in the vicinity of where the fire burnt. We know that the National Assembly building was gutted. The extent of the damage is quite severe. Also, the National Council of Provinces offices also damaged. A little earlier we spoke to the City of Cape Town's JP Smith. We know that Parliament has praised the quick response by the City of Cape Town's firefighters. They said that if they had arrived or taken any longer to arrive, the damage may have been even more severe than what we see it being now. Those firefighters managed to arrive within 6 minutes. Let's just take a listen to what Smith talks about, because he speaks there about what the next steps are once the city has handed over the scene to the officials, to those investigators, to continue with the investigations. Let's just take a listen.
So we've de-escalated now quite a bit. There were about 70 firefighters and 12 appliances, including the big hydraulic platforms yesterday on site. We're down to 2 crews with just 10 firefighters just damping down, mainly on the 4th floor of this building. The books are still smouldering particularly. That's also because a lot of the heat was contained. There are certain security features of this building that meant that the windows remained intact, and that heat was all boxed in, as well as the smoke. So they're ventilating the building now, and within the next hour we will be handing the building back, and the fire will be withdrawing. Then it is the job for the investigators to go and determine what happened. We have 2 very competent fire safety officials who do this for a living every day, who did some observations yesterday that they are recording, and that document will be circulated to our counterparts in SAPS as part of the investigation.
And speaking of that investigation, we know that a 49-year-old suspect was arrested. We've just heard from the Hawks that he's expected to appear in court tomorrow. I did ask, however, whether there's the possibility of others maybe being responsible if it's found that there was some type of lapse in security protocol. What do you know up until now just of what may have happened?
So I think that there is a bit of a problem here. It is hard to imagine how a person gains access and steals items. It's good that he was arrested and he is being charged tomorrow. I understand also for arson, but it's hard to imagine how somebody gains access to this precinct. It's fairly well secure. So there would have had to be a pretty big lapse in security, or the person would have had to have some kind of legal access, some kind of employee or contractor who is intermittently able to gain access to this premises. But certainly a big lapse in security. Our fire staff who were here, we were the first responders. made some observations which we will put in our written report that's also of concern, and it's perhaps something we don't want to talk about. They made observations about persons who they found on the scene which shouldn't have been here, specifically in Government Lane. That is of concern. Either way, this happened the night before, so it's not immediately apparent how it would relate to the fire. The fire started in the office complex above the old assembly. Yesterday, when Minister de Lille was present, she indicated that those were the offices of some party political officers up there, and that is presumably where the investigation needs to start, adjacent to the gym. That's where the fire seems to have initiated from. But there was also a fire on the other side of the building behind me, with a section of building in between that appeared unaffected. So critically for the fire investigation, they will need to determine how you had two separate fires with a section of building in between unaffected. There could be things like the propagation of the fire via the air conditioning system, because just as the fire detection system was very delayed in initiating, so too, unfortunately, the electricity didn't trip. So that had to be manually switched off for the precinct. That could have assisted in the propagation via the air conditioning system. Could have been an electrical fire. There could have been other issues. That's for the experts to pronounce on. But they will need to go to reconcile the fact that you had two separate points of fire with a section of building in between that was not actually on fire, and where there was no obvious means of how the fire propagated. So that would be critical to a competent or capable investigation.
Final question, extent of the damages. What do we know so far?
So the chamber behind me, one of the officials remarked this morning there was 98% destroyed. So all but completely gutted. Portions of the ceiling had fallen down. So very extensive damage to the new assembly chamber, and that will need to be repaired. And then the chamber, the old assembly chamber, mercifully appears to have been largely undamaged. We walked around it in the dark yesterday. You couldn't get through any of the doors, and they didn't want to break the doors down unnecessarily. Might be water damage, because there was a lot of water coming down from the 2 floors above. The 2 floors above are gutted, and of course the roof is now gone. There is no more roof on top of that old assembly section. Hundreds of millions of rands, if not a billion or more rands worth of damages, and some of the historic artifacts that's not easy to replace. It's going to require great care with very capable restoration experts to restore as best possible massive damage that was done here. Very unfortunate.